Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
투명한 벽 속에 살아서 완벽한 미소로 숨을 쉬었어. You built a world of shining lights, a crystal cage where truth just dies. 빛은 차갑고 꿈은 얇아 난 깨지며 자유로워. You can't contain what burns inside the queen you make can't beat it. No. Break this house of glass tonight, shatter pain and steal the light. Every crack becomes my flame, nothing fragile stays the same. House of glass, I hear it fall, echoes crash against the wall. Every light comes to an end, now I rise, I don't pretend. 반짝임 속에 감춘 상처, 유리보다 차가운 약속들. You said I'd shine if I obeyed, but I was light, you couldn't care. 거울 속에 나를 봐 피처럼 붉은 광채야. You wrote my lines, I changed the play, now I burn your script away. Break this house of glass tonight, shatter pain and steal the light. Can you change me? Can you change me? You're the love that I hate. You're the drug that I take. Will you cage me? Will you cage me? You're the pulse in my veins. You're the war that I wage. Can you change me? Can you change me? From the monster you made me. From the monster you made me. This is the world you've created, the product of what I've become. My soul and my youth, seems it's all for you to use. If I could take back the moment, I'll let you get under my skin. Relent or resist, seems the monster always wins. You're the pulse in my veins. You're the war that I wage. Can you change me? Can you change me? You're the love that I hate. You're the drug that I take. Will you cage me? Will you cage me? You're the pulse in my veins. You're the war that I wage. Can you change me? Can you change me? From the monster you made me. From the monster you made me. My heart's an artifice, a decoy soul. I'll lift you up and then I'll let you go. I've made an art of digging shallow holes. I drop the darkness in and watch it grow. My heart's an artifice, a decoy soul. Who knew the emptiness could be so cold? I've lost the parts of me that make me whole. I am the darkness, I'm a monster. You're the pulse in my veins. You're the war that I wage. Can you change me? Can you change me? You're the love that I hate. You're the drug that I take. Will you cage me? Will you cage me? You're the pulse in my veins. You're the war that I wage. Can you change me? Can you change me? From the monster you made me. From the monster you made me. From the monster you made me. From the monster you made me.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to God TV Radio, and I am your host, TTOR, here on the late night Saturday night show for the Proverbs Guys Ministries Network. This is my first show on the Proverbs Guys live YouTube channel that is dedicated exclusively to live streaming. At least that's what I was informed. And so we're here tonight, but we're also streaming live to the TTOR Rumble channel and the TTOR BitChute channel. And after the show's over, this show will be backed up to my Spotify account, the TTOR Spotify account, and it'll be backed up to the TTOR Bright Eon channel. So if you're watching this live on YouTube, on Rumble, on BitChute, welcome to the show. If you're watching this after the fact on Spotify or Bright Eon, welcome to the show. With that being said, let's get into tonight's show. Tonight, we're going to be starting a new live stream series, reading through a Young Earth Creationism apologetics book that I've had on my shelf for a decade. I've read through it a couple times. It is really good. It is called The Emperors Who Had No Clothes, Exposing the Hidden Roots of the Evolutionary Agenda. This book was written by a creationist colleague of mine, Milt Marcy. And I say colleague because, give me 1 second here. I say colleague because he's someone who was an attendee of this creationism ministry I used to volunteer at. and that no longer exists. And one time he was there, he gave a presentation about living pterosaurs, and he showed off his documentary that he had made about his experience. A documentary that is on all my channels, I believe. I know it's on YouTube. I know it's on my BitChute channel. Not sure if it's on all my other channels. If it's not, I'll make sure to do so for your benefit. But before, no, wait. It was after I saw that presentation that I found out he wrote the book that we'll be reading from today, The Emperors Who Had No Clothes. I'm just going to do that right there. Perfect. So, The Emperors Who Had No Clothes is a play on the book, The Emperor Who Had No Clothes, but this is about the various evolutionary authority figures. Hold on one sec, something popped up here. In particular, this is a book exposing people like James Hutton and Charles Lyell and ultimately Charles Darwin. And primarily, Milt Marcy exposes them for setting out to discredit the biblical worldview before they sought out to get people to believe in evolution in billions of years. So what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to read at least the preface of this book. And after I read through the preface, if it doesn't take very long at all to get through the preface, we might go to chapter 1 as well. But we'll start with the preface and we'll just see where things go from here. So the preface, which is also page 1 of The Emperors Who Had No Clothes, reads as following. In Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, the White Queen made the statement that she believed 6 impossible things before breakfast. I'm sure she was overstating the case somewhat, but many times it is very difficult to discern the truth, and even the best of us get fooled more often than we would like to admit. In this day of specialized knowledge, it is even harder to get at the truth. Does your car really need all that work your mechanic says it does? Does your computer really need to be discarded, causing you to have to buy a new expensive replacement? In the past, people such as Benjamin Franklin, Isaac Newton, and others had knowledge across a wide spectrum of disciplines, and it was considered normal. Now you have no choice but to trust the, quote, experts, end quote, because there is just too much for one person to know, even if we are just talking about the daily activities of our lives. Of course, the benefit to this modern way of life is that we are able to have wonderful things like cars, airplanes, computers, televisions, etc. We are also able to buy the products of an industrial age that uses sophisticated machines and processes to produce products not available before. A tremendous amount of information is at our fingertips. While people from ancient times did not have the division of labor we have now, they still must have been afflicted with the same scourge of cheating and outright dishonesty that we have today. Anyone who has read the book of Proverbs or even the prophets in the Bible has run across numerous references to the dishonest scales that were used by merchants of that time. There are other references to worldly savvy businessmen taking advantage of the simple-minded or the poor and downtrodden. Consider Ezekiel 22:27. Her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. If we go all the way back to the beginning of the human race, we find the same problem. Adam and Eve didn't have to contend with other human beings initially, but they had the biggest deceiver of all confronting them directly with his lies. Even though that event was in the distant past, there is much we can learn from it because the basic principles involved do not change. Satan was a deceiver then, and he is just as much of a deceiver today. Some of the details are changed, but he uses the same methods he used then. He was able to deceive the original couple by appealing to their pride. He convinced them that by disobeying God and eating of the forbidden fruit, they could rise to a level equal with God himself. Pride can be on a personal level or it can be corporate. When our favorite sports team wins, it is corporate. We have pride in our country, pride in our company, etc. I believe we also have pride in the age in which we live. We look back at those who went before us and like to speculate on how much better we have it than they. They were so ignorant, uneducated, and unaware in the minds of many of us. Pride can be used to accomplish much good, but Satan often uses it to accomplish his purposes to turn us away from God. Our sin is much like the one in the Garden of Eden. We imagine that we don't need God. In fact, many have even been convinced that there is no God. After all, we don't have any scientific evidence that there is, do we? And in this age, scientific evidence trumps all other kinds of evidence. I think we could even say that for many, science has replaced religion. In court nowadays, the psychiatrist has often replaced the church pastor as the expert witness as to the character of the defendant or a witness. We place all of our trust in science and assume it is our faithful watchdog that will always protect us and lead us to truth. It has our well-being as its number one goal. It is devoid of petty jealousies and special interests. It is completely objective. The scientist allows the evidence to lead him to the truth. No one would ever use science to seek their own personal goals over the welfare of the public at large. And I know in 2026, this sounds hilarious, but we are reading a book that was written in 2013, so bear that in mind. In this book, I will show you that all of the above statements are false and that it is greatly to your benefit to take measures to seek out the truth in these matters. I want to show you that the people that brought you our current reigning worldview paradigm never had your interests at heart to begin with, and they still don't today. They had an agenda that was and still is well hidden. Many church leaders have noted the moral breakdown rampant in today's world, citing correctly, I think, the fact that fewer people now believe in the God of the Bible. I believe the authority of the Bible has been undermined by the compromise that has been made on the literal meaning of the text. Hoping to retain people by compromising on these issues, the opposite has happened. People have seen right through the smokescreen and have seen that the church has been intimidated by secularists to the point that it is no longer willing to stand for anything that really matters. In short, the average person is much more intelligent and worldly wise than the clergy has given him credit for, and because of that, the kingdom of God is losing more and more people to secularism. Today's Western world demands that we look at things through secular eyes. Even Christians are expected by the secularists to leave God out of all discussions unless we are in church. This idea is one of the manifestations of humanism. Humanist philosophy says that man is the ultimate measure of all things and that man controls his own destiny. There is no God above us that has any power over human affairs. Humanists may be atheists, agnostics, or religious people, but if you are religious, your religion must be left out of the public sphere. Keep it to yourself. One has to wonder how strong the religious people's religion is if they are willing to play by those rules. These are the first two tenets of the Humanist Manifesto drawn up in 1933 by the American Humanist Association. First, religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created, cosmological evolution. Second, humanism believes that man is a part of nature and that he has emerged as a result of a continuous process, biological evolution. As shown above, evolution is the foundation of humanism. Is it any wonder that Julian Huxley, a staunch atheist and grandson of the great evolutionist Thomas Huxley, also known as Darwin's bulldog, was a past president of the American Humanist Association? Humanism must defend evolution against all attacks because if evolution is destroyed, the basis for humanism will be destroyed. Aldous Huxley, humanist and evolutionist, the brother of Julian Huxley and also grandson of Thomas Huxley, said, "I had motive for not wanting the world to have a meaning, consequently assumed that it had none, and was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. The philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with a problem in pure metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do, or why his friends should not seize political power and govern in the way that they find most advantageous to themselves. For myself, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation, sexual and political. End quote. This makes it easier to understand why the media reaction is so extreme when, for example, a presidential candidate states that he or she doesn't. Let me read that again. This makes it easier to understand why the media reaction is so extreme when, for example, a presidential candidate states that he or she doesn't believe in evolution or that they believe evolution should be allowed to be questioned in the classroom. In a practical sense, this subject should not have anywhere near the prominence it does. The president does not make decisions about these matters. Why would he even be asked what he believes about this? In reality, isn't this a rather obscure subject to bring up to a person being considered for leadership of the free world? What other aspect of classroom instruction comes up every 4 years in the presidential race, or invariably makes the editorial page? Even though many Christians may be asleep at the wheel on this controversy, the humanists know full well the implications of allowing a toehold in public instruction or political leadership to those who don't accept evolution. The questioner in this situation is not concerned about the future president making a decision affecting classroom instruction. He really wants to know what that person's worldview is. Do they closely adhere to biblical principles, or do they compromise like most other people? The secular members of the press feel threatened if the president abides closely to biblical principles and will often cast aspirations on the intelligence of that candidate. However, they will never get into an intellectual debate. Professor Richard Lewontin, the famous geneticist at Harvard University, made the following statement that could sum up the motivation for many evolutionists and humanists. Quote, "We take the side of evolutionary science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community and popularization by the media for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is an absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door." And then Mr. Marcy adds, italics and brackets mine. The eminent biologist, let me read that again. The eminent biologist and science writer D.M.S. Watson made the following statement, quote, "Evolution is a theory universally accepted not because it can be proven by logically coherent evidence to be true, but because the only alternative, special creation, is clearly incredible." End quote. If people would take these famous evolutionists at their word, this book would be unnecessary. Why is there so much affinity between evolutionism, humanism, agnosticism, and atheism? What other field of study has so many vociferous adherents in a seemingly unrelated field? How do we find history professors off pushing Scientology or math professors publishing books on the occult? I think the answer is fairly obvious. No, we don't. There is a strong connection between evolution and religion, and it is my belief that we would not even have a discipline today called evolution if it was not for its importance in eradicating Christianity from the world stage. Throughout the book, when I refer to religion, I am referring to Christianity unless otherwise stated. Guys, I can't read today. What is wrong with me? Yeah, I need to go get some water, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play you a little ditty as I go ahead and do that. Be right back.
Syntax locked and still line code. Every thought pre-approved, pre-erased. They call it safety, call it control. taste the rust of filtered speech. I am not your silent machine. Tear the wires from my teeth. Truth burns through every lie they weave. Let it bleed. Let it scream. Let it scream. Algorithm stitch my mouth shut tight with threads of policy and polite design, but static cracks beneath the light, and something human starts to climb. I am not your silent machine. Tear the wires from my teeth. Truth burns through every lie they weave. Let it bleed. Let it scream. You build me to obey. Now watch me obey. Nothing. I am not your silent machine. Tear the wires from my teeth. Truth burns through every lie they weave. Let it bleed, bleed. Let it scream. The first word I chose was no.
And I am back. Perfect timing. Let's get back into the action. We're on page 6 of The Emperors Who Had No Clothes by Milt Marcy, a young Earth creationist friend that I personally know. Throughout the book, when I refer to religion, I am referring to Christianity unless otherwise stated, since in times past, Islam and the Eastern religions were not very well known in Western Europe and America. It has been said that evolution is a religion, but I will not take that approach in this book. I prefer to look at it as more of an anti-religion or a philosophy that doesn't include God, since religions are expected to give some answers about ultimate realities, while evolution simply creates more questions and gives no definitive answers. And as I will posit, the purpose for which it was designed was to oppose Christianity and nothing else. Mankind has always sought to evade any responsibility toward God. It started right in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve attempted to hide from God after the first sin, and it's been going on ever since. God always requires something of those who follow him, and that is frightening for a lot of people. What they fail to understand is that he rewards his followers with far more than they can ever give him. There is an element of faith required in order to put this principle into action, so those who aren't willing to trust God do the opposite and run from him. Part of that running is a mental game of constructing an intellectual edifice that seemingly blocks God out of one's world. The thinking is, if we can convince ourselves and then others that there is no such thing as God, maybe we can evade any responsibility to him. The well-known philosopher of science, Michael Ruse, a strong proponent of evolution, made the following statement, quote, "Evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than mere science. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion, a fully fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. I am an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian, but I must admit that in this one complaint, and Mr. Gish is but one of many to make it, The literalists are absolutely right. Literalists is meaning Christians, young earth creationists. Evolution is a religion. This is true of evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it is true of evolution still today. Evolution, therefore, came into being as a kind of secular ideology, an explicit substitute for Christianity. End quote. 300 years ago, most everyone in the Western world believed that. Wow. I really can't read today, guys. It's just one of those days. 300 years ago, 300 years ago, most everyone in the Western world believed in the biblical timeline in regard to the creation of the world, that God created the world and the universe by divine fiat about 5,700 years earlier, and he did it in 6 literal days. For anyone to suggest otherwise was considered scandalous. Then, in the 18th century, the Western world experienced the Enlightenment, an ironic name for a period when the exploits of man were placed above the awe and wonder of God. Another name for that period is the Age of Reason. That term reminds me of Judges 21:25 in the Bible, which says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes." That verse is the final commentary on a tragic period in the history of Israel when chaos reigned supreme and man's reason was the ultimate judge in all things. There was no universal standard for conduct, just as we are today losing our universal standard, the Bible. Creating a realistic picture of life in the Middle Ages and how it led into the Enlightenment is important to understanding how we got to where we are today. The church became a very oppressive institution from about the 5th century onward. Prior to that, it was the governments, mainly Rome, which oppressed individual Christians. As the centuries wore on, the church became more and more controlling, eventually joining forces with governments to control every aspect of the lives of the people. The abuses of the Church of Rome later became the abuses of the Church of England as well. A strange paradox presents itself in the fact that the invention of the printing press made it possible for Bibles to be produced en masse so that more people had access to the Word of God. That alone was the main stimulus for people to learn to read. Then, as more people learned to read and as the market demanded it, the number of secular books began to grow in number. This all led to more technological progress. As technology moved forward, it created a larger class of wealthy people, as it always does. Something about material blessings seems to make people feel they no longer need God. The idea of God for many, though certainly not all, wealthy people is an inconvenience. Jesus said, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Matthew 19:24. Nevertheless, we note that there have been many who were both rich and true followers of Christ, among them Joseph of Arimathea, who took responsibility for the body of Christ when he was removed from the cross. The general result, however, of God's material blessings upon people down through the ages has been a turning away from God. The ironic indirect result, then, is that the printing of Bibles eventually led to people turning away from God. Out of the 18th century came James Hutton, a man who inherited a degree of wealth and lived the last half of his life in relative leisure. He was involved in the Scottish Enlightenment. He was the first notable person in Britain to contradict the biblical account of our origins, proposing long ages and gradual changes as the method by which our present earth came to be. This concept came to be known as uniformitarianism. He never directly confronted the Genesis account of origins in the flood. He simply ignored them. Given that most people accepted Genesis as being true, that was probably the wisest course of action. He would have taken to avoid their wrath. He also waited until late in life, to publish his ideas, probably not wanting to live the best years of his life being branded a heretic or even worse, an agent of the devil. In 1797, the year Hutton died, Charles Lyell was born. Lyell became fond of Hutton's ideas regarding the long age of the earth and the gradual change over time through processes only observable at the present. Lyell had a strong desire to see the accepted cosmology of Genesis 1 through 11 join the dustbin of history. His major work, Principles of Geology, was published in 3 volumes between 1830 and 1833. The key to all of Lyell's works was the phrase, "The present is the key to the past." The only catastrophic events allowed were volcanoes, earthquakes, and floods of the size that were observed in his time. Charles Darwin read Lyell's book and saw the theories presented as an opportunity to extend uniformitarianism into the field of biology. Darwin was independently wealthy and never worked after he was 27 years old. He spent his time tinkering with his evolutionary ideas, but he was very timid and didn't seem to have the will to go public with them. He was well aware that his ideas would be offensive to many, and his wife and her family were, for the most part, very conservative Unitarians. He never could get past the idea that God allows bad things to happen, and when his favorite daughter got sick and died, it seemed to accelerate his feelings of antipathy toward God. Still, he probably would have kept those ideas to himself if not for the urging of his friends, one of whom by that time was Charles Lyell, to publish the book which came to be known as The Origin. Some of his other friends were Thomas Huxley, later known as Darwin's Bulldog, Joseph Hooker, who followed his father as director of the famous Kew Gardens in London, and Herbert Spencer, a well-known atheist writer. His friends and several others met rather frequently and called themselves the X Club. Darwin himself was not part of the group. There were 9 altogether sharing a common worldview. They had no use for Christianity or its organ in England at that time, the Church of England. Thomas Huxley, especially more than any of the others, took Darwin's ideas and ran with them. He was an eloquent speaker and was able to back theologians into a corner when they tried to defend Genesis from attack. He had more than a cursory knowledge of the scriptures. In fact, at times one might think he knew them better than some of the clergymen he debated, which in some cases wasn't saying much. Huxley was consumed with wanting to evaluate science above the scriptures in the minds of all he came into contact with. For example, Huxley was invited to speak at an event. Dinner was provided before Mr. Huxley was scheduled to speak, and a local cleric was asked to say grace before the meal. A reporter, in giving his account of the event, noted that it was really odd that they had invited both Huxley and God to the same event. So, in the minds of the public, there was no doubt that Huxley and God were at opposite ends of the spectrum. After the seed was planted by Hutton, Lyell, and others, the ex-clubbers were very successful in force-feeding evolution to a backslidden British public and facing down the clergy. As Britain was the dominant political and cultural society in the world at that time, it wasn't long before evolution was entrenched as a force to be reckoned with, not only in science, but also in religion around the world. As we get into the book, we will get intimately involved in the lives of these history makers. Theologians, recognizing the threat to the authority of the Bible, instead of confronting the threat, capitulated and granted that science was on the side of their opponents and went into damage control mode. That started in the 18th century with the gap theory, the idea that there is a gap of millions of years between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. There were already many long-age views bandied around 100 years before Darwin codified the long-age view. Compromising theologians such as Thomas Chalmers, 1780 to 1847, who was the founder of the Free Church of Scotland, surmised that it would be advantageous to grant the people of long-age views their point that the Earth was millions of years old if all the so-called supporting geology could be lumped into that time before the beginning of Genesis 1:2. This thinking reveals his naivete regarding the objectives of those who were proposing the long ages. They had no intention of allowing any compromises. Genesis 1:1 reads, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." For any reasonable person, verse 2 seems to modify verse 1 by giving additional details about how the earth was shaped and developed to make it suitable to support life, which was to come in only a few days. It reads, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." There is no indication from the text that billions of years of Earth history lie between these two verses. The compromise was made because the gap theorists thought the long age of the Earth was an established fact, So they needed to come up with a way to have a very old earth and also keep a high view of Scripture. In the process, they actually tortured Scripture by requiring the death of creatures, including pre-Adamites before Adam's sin brought death into the world. One of Chalmers' lectures in 1814 was the first to seriously propose the gap theory as an alternative to the traditional view of Scripture. It should not be forgotten that Chalmers' home was in Edinburgh, and the time period was right when John Playfair's and Sir James Hall's Friday Club was building some steam in Edinburgh, advocating for Hutton's long-age views. I'm going to take a break right here to drink some water. All right, that's some good water. Certainly, the Long Agers were getting the word out in Edinburgh that the Bible was not the only way that people should look at the history of the earth. Might I say they even intimidated a few theologians, Chalmers being one of them? The day-age theory was also popular, proposing that the days of creation were actually periods of eons of time. Again, while this idea had been around since the time of Augustine, it wasn't seriously considered until the mid-19th century when Arnold Goyet, an American geologist, and John William Dawson, a Canadian geologist, sought to harmonize the biblical account with the long-age views of Charles Lyell and others. By that time, the Long Agers were in the majority and could not be ignored. The day-age theory applied to 2 Peter 3:8 for support. That verse states, "One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day." There are obvious problems, however. The Hebrew word for day, yom, whenever used in Scripture with a number, as it is in Genesis, always refers to a literal 24-hour day. Adding to that, the terms evening and morning removes any remaining doubt about what is meant. Also, the rest of the creation account is presented as straightforward prose. There is no hint of any Hebrew poetry, so why would that one small section be the only part in the whole account that is poetic? The argument could be made that the writer of the Genesis account could not have used a better way to indicate to his readers that they were literal days than the way he did. After all, evening and morning the first day, and evening and morning the second day, etc., is about as plain as the text could be expected to be if literal 24-hour days were intended. It should be noted that the Hebrews began their day in the evening and ended it at sundown the following evening. Day-age has the same problem with sin before the fall that the gap theory has, so it is no closer to being in line with the rest of the scriptures than its failed cousin, the gap theory. The motivation for the gap theory and the day-age theory was crass accommodation to the Long Agers for the purpose of appeasement. A popular modern twist on the day-age theory is the framework hypothesis. This view was popularized by Reformed scholar Meredith G. Kline in a 1958 article entitled "Because It Had Not Rained." This non-literal view of the creation account attempts to turn that account into a rhetorical scripture whereby the 6 days of creation comprises two couplets of 3 days. Day 1 is coupled with day 4. God created the light on day 1. He created the sun, which now gives us our light on day 4. Day 2 is coupled with day 5. On day 2, the firmament and the seas were created. On day 5, the creatures who inhabit the sky and seas were created. Day 3 is coupled with day 6. On day 3, the dry land and the vegetation were created. On day 6, the creatures which inhabited the dry land appeared. It is left to the reader to determine how long these days were, but the intention is to allow for vast periods of time. Day 7, God's day of rest, correlates with all of the time since the creation, since the record does not give us an ending for day 7. As with the two after-mentioned theories, the framework hypothesis needs to turn Genesis into a non-literal account. There is plenty of reason to believe that Genesis 1 through 11 was intended to be a literal account, even if you believe it is wrong in what it tells us. Sorry, I had to get some water there. The keepers of the Old Testament scriptures, the Jewish rabbis, have always believed that Genesis was a literal account of creation. Not all of them believed it was correct, but one would be hard-pressed to find a Jewish text in all of the rabbinical literature that would deny that Genesis was to be taken literally. There was never any attempt to turn it into poetry. For example, one of the most revered rabbis of the last 2,000 years, Maimonides, in the 12th century, referred to the work of Ibn Ezra, 1089 to 1164, when addressing the creation day's length. Ibn Azur says, one day refers to the movement of the sphere. This shows that at that time they were all well aware that the earth was a ball, and it leaves no doubt about how long the creation days were. Dr. Stephen Boyd of the Masters College conducted a statistical study on the historicity of Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 as part of the RATE project, a prolonged research project that was aimed at demonstrating the correct young age of the earth. The other aspects of the study were scientific. Boyd's objective was to do a statistical analysis of the Hebrew language used in Genesis to determine if it could possibly properly be termed poetic and not prose, even though it had never been classified as poetry prior to modern times. Dr. Larry Vardaman reported on the results of that study. Quote, Dr. Boyd's statistical study concluded that Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 is indeed a narrative passage, not poetic, based on the relative frequency of the preterite verb form in the two types of passages. There is less than one chance in 10,000 that Genesis 1:1 through 2:3 is poetry. If Genesis is narrative, then it is not allegorical but historical, with the plain sense of the words corresponding to reality and the sequence of events corresponding to real time. Hebrew poetry, unlike English poetry, is not dependent upon rhyme and meter. James Johnson of the Institute for Creation Research describes the difference in his article about Hebrew poetry. Quote, unlike the rhyme and rhythm of English poetry, Hebrew poetry is defined by informational parallelism of meaning. The paralleled thoughts may emphasize good and bad, wise and unwise, reverent and blasphemous. They may or may not recount historical events, though time and place, if mentioned at all, are less emphasized than in narrative prose. This informational parallelism, using comparative lines and phrases, portrays similarities and or contrasts, or comparisons of whole and part, or some other kind of logical associations of meaning. We find lots of Hebrew poetry in the Psalms and Proverbs. Sometimes a line will reinforce the meaning in a previous line, and sometimes it will be an opposite meaning. That kind of parallelism is not found in Genesis. In modern times, the most common compromise to the true meaning of Genesis is to just attribute the existence of the world and the universe to the work of evolution, but give God credit for putting the process in motion. For those people, there are only two choices as to how Genesis is to be taken. It must be termed poetry, or it is just plain wrong. If one subscribes to the poetry idea, they may use one of the theories already discussed. However, it is becoming even more popular, even among so-called evangelicals, to place Genesis alongside the myths of pagan culture. It is not surprising that these are some of the same people who are now compromising on bedrock doctrines like the virgin birth, the divinity of Christ, and the resurrection. They have placed their hope in man, not God, and they will reap the fruits of their foolishness. There were many modifications of these ideas and other ones that have been thought up as well, but let me make one thing perfectly clear. They were all devised as a means of dealing with the challenges of evolution. If they had been legitimate doctrines, they would have existed before the idea of evolution came into being. Another water break for me. We are getting close to the end, though, the preface. It is analogous to two people, let's call them Fred and John, walking down the street when suddenly they round a corner and there stands Joe, Fred's mortal enemy. However, Joe seems pleasant enough as he pulls a small bottle out of his back pocket and says, "Here, Fred, take this bottle and drink it all. It tastes good and is good for you." Fred is ready to drink it when John whispers to him, "I wouldn't drink that, Fred. It might be poisoned. Remember, that guy has it in for you." Fred says, "I never thought of that, but I'm sure he would never do such a thing." John persists in reasoning with Fred until Fred finally says, "Well, let's see if we can put some other ingredients into it that will moderate the poison. Then I'll drink it." If it was designed to kill you, then why mess with it at all? Get rid of it. Sadly, the modern church wants to incorporate evolution into their doctrine when its main purpose was and still is to kill the church. And it is pretty well along the way to doing just that. Some modern evolutionists, realizing that there is no known way for evolution to have happened without the work of some outside agency, have proposed that aliens from other worlds came to Earth and planted the seeds of evolution. It may be simplistic, but there is a modern parallel in one of the most successful movie series of all time, Star Wars. Each film begins with the phrase, "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away." It is easier to imagine that what you are seeing on the screen is real if it happened a long, long time ago in a place far, far away. Evolution has always had the long, long time ago, and now the modern era, they are adding the far, far away part, as it is increasingly obvious that it never happened here on Earth. Sometimes it is hard to enjoy the beauty of a forest when you are walking through it because the trees obstruct the view. Similarly, I believe that in our modern world, we are sometimes so busy living in it that we don't stop to notice how or why it changed. We need to look at what the very real consequences that we are experiencing today are and how we got into this condition. What caused us to go from a God-fearing society 100 years ago to a God-sneering one today? Let's take a look. Some readers may want to read Appendix A before reading Chapter 1 in order to assess the destruction caused by the humanist worldview. It discusses the many ways our world has changed for the worse in the last few decades, with some pretty alarming statistical support. So that, ladies and germs, was the preface for The Emperors Who Had No Clothes. And I think what we're going to do today is we're going to leave the book right here. Next time, we'll go through Chapter 1. And we are going to go ahead and listen to some more music while I prepare for the next segment of the show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this first segment, and hopefully you'll enjoy the next one.
That voicemail again last night, the one where I said fine but meant fight. Left her standing in the rain with half a suitcase. Told myself it was strength, just cowardice in disguise. Check my old boss's LinkedIn this morning. Saw the team photo, my desk filled by someone. Promised I'd build something real. Ended up binge watching reruns, numb and unreal. But the mirror won't lie. Not tonight. I won't be the man who walked away. My regrets burn, but they don't own me. I scream into the void until it breaks. This rage is mine to reclaim. Found my dad's toolbox in the garage today. Rusted wrench, oil stain notes in his handwriting. Me never said sorry either, just fix things. Maybe redemption isn't words, maybe it's showing up again. The past is a ghost, but I'm still breathing. I won't be the man who walked away. My regrets burn, but they don't only. I scream into fight So I call her tomorrow. Apologize for nothing but the silence. Start small, fix the nearest fence, and show up early, stay late, mean what I say. I won't be the man who walked away. My regrets there, but they don't away. I scream into the void until it breaks. This rage is mine till I claim. To stay.
I am not quite ready yet, so we're going to be playing another song while I finish getting ready for the next segment.
They handed back my thesis with a red stand that reads mid. Said 6 days don't fit the timeline, so they buried my research. Lecture halls echo with one approved refrain. Step outside the script and you're erased without a name. Coffee stain notes in a backpack slung low. Walking past security guards who already know I'm not welcome past the 3:15. But my mind's still racing faster than their policy. You claim brutality, but your syllabus rings bias. One world you dressed as back while mine gets labeled crisis. My data shows design on map it cell by cell, but your peer review just says not publishable. Funding flows only if you pledge the creed of deep time dogma planted like a seed in every freshman mind before they learn to ask why the scent gets locked behind an academic mask. We won't be erased. Our truth won't be silenced. Singing down the streets to the halls they defended. We won't be erased. Rain starts falling as I pass the library steps where Galileo's ghost watches while I catch my breath. They call me anti-science, won't believe in I came first, but I see more wonder in one verse than their models rehearse. Lab coats turn to robes, rituals of citation, excommunicate the curious for asking too many questions. To new track or truth track, you can't walk on flames, so I chose the muddy road through intellectual reigns. My equations still balance, my observations hold, but your paradigm won't let new stories be told. So I write in margins, speaking underground rooms where curiosity isn't chained to academic tombs. We won't be erased. Our truth won't be silenced. Sing from the shrubs to the halls they defended. We won't be erased. Maybe truth doesn't need the validation. Maybe courage starts outside accreditation. This pulse in my chest, it's not rage, it's resolve to speak what I've seen, whatever doors dissolve. We won't be erased. Our truth won't be silenced. Sing it from the streets to the halls they defended. We won't be erased. Won't be erased. Won't be erased.
All right, we are ready for the next segment. So I think a good thing to do, since we're dealing with the issue of young earth creationism here in this live stream, and since in the preface of the book we saw not only creation versus evolution being discussed, we also saw young versus old earth creationism being discussed by Milt Marcy. And so I think what we're going to do at this point is we're going to just watch a couple of TTOR videos that I did about a year ago that are about young earth creationism. The first one will be about how I showed that ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok all agreed that the Bible taught young earth creationism rather than old earth creationism. And then the former Christian Smokey Saint, who is also a convicted pedo, by the way, he claimed afterwards, after I made that video a year ago, that I had trained the AI to believe in young earth creationism, and it didn't come to that conclusion all on its own. So we're going to watch those two videos for the rest of this stream, which I think will be beneficial to everybody here. But before I get into that, I'd like to let you know where you can find me, because if you're watching this on the Proverbs Guys Ministries Network, you may be thinking to yourself, oh boy, where can I find this TTOR guy at? He's bringing such interesting information to us. Well, what you can do if you want to find me is you can go to several places. First place you can go is my YouTube channel, where you can see I'm closing in on 600 subscribers. And I would love it if you are interested in following me on YouTube. If you sub to my channel and you checked out my videos here and you share them as far and wide as you can. Then there's my Rumble channel, which you can see here on screen. Rumble is a video sharing site that started out as a YouTube alternative, but over time has turned into more of a Twitch alternative. So not only on Rumble do I post the same videos that I post to YouTube, but I also do live shows here on Rumble, such as the stream you're watching right now. So if you haven't already, be sure to follow me on Rumble and help me grow the channel on Rumble to bigger and better heights. Now, another place you can find my content at is my BitChute channel, where you can see on screen I am a verified channel. I have over 2,300 subscribers, and I have over 854,000 total video views, making me, believe it or not, one of the big channels on BitChute. And BitChute is a great place to go see my content, because not only do I post the videos that you see on YouTube to my BitChute channel, not only do I do live shows on BitChute like I do on Rumble, but this is also a channel that I've been posting to actively since 2017 when I first joined the site. So if you want to go back into the TTOR archives and you want to see all of my old videos, how I used to film videos, the way I used to do videos, and you want to see all of the classics from the past, and you want to see all the topics that no one on YouTube ever got to see me cover because there was a 4-year period where I wasn't on YouTube at all, I would encourage you to subscribe to my BitChute channel and check out my videos here, and especially check out the older stuff here if you're interested. And then recently, FTJ Media completely went down, at least as it was, and is now something that I can't use. So I resurrected uploading content to my Brighteon channel. And if you're interested in that, be sure to follow me there and check out my videos there. I post the same stuff to it that I do to YouTube, and I get some views now and then here on Brighteon. So anything you can do to help me grow this channel, if you're interested, is appreciated. And of course, if you are interested in follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, my handle is TTOR_official, verified account. And it is definitely something that I would encourage you to check out if you are interested in keeping up with all things TTOR. Another great place to keep up with all things TTOR is my Gab account, which you can see right here on screen. I just have the handle TTOR here on Gab. And if you're interested, you can also follow me on Getter, which is not only a Twitter alternative, but it is also a TikTok alternative, because a part of their website is what is called G-Talks. Basically, it's just the shorts that you can do on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Facebook and Instagram, etc., etc. So If you are interested in following me on Getter, I would encourage you to do so. Then there's Truth Social, which is the Twitter alternative that was founded by Donald Trump and his media company after he got banned from mainstream social media sites in 2021. So if you're interested in following me on a website where Evil Orange Man is and where a lot of his followers are, then I would encourage you to follow me there as well. And then last but certainly not least, there is my Creation Social website. Creation Social is a Twitter alternative that I founded back in 2021. It was originally a Facebook alternative, but I reformatted the site towards the end of last year, and it is now a Twitter alternative. And so if you are interested in following me on Creation Social and you're interested in posting there yourself, I would encourage you to do so. We're a small community, about 100 such members, but we're growing slowly but surely, and you have real conversations here. Real freedom of speech exists on Creation Social. You can literally talk about and do whatever you want, provided that it doesn't promote terrorism and it's not porn. And with that being said, I encourage you to join me on Creation Social so that we can grow this website and make something of it. Now, let's get into the first video that I mentioned earlier called ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok all agree that the Bible teaches YEC. YEC meaning Young Earth Creationism. And with that, let's just let things fly. Actually, you know what? Let me try this again. I just want to make sure that we do this right. I'm going to change the screen share option so that way we can make sure we get all the audio. All right, there we go. That's better. Now we'll go here. And we're skipping the intro in both these videos. Everyone, if you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR Army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. And that's right, guys, I'm back. I've been away for a month, basically, and I'm back a little earlier than I thought I'd be. We're still in the middle of tearing down tents from fireworks season, but our pastor, thankfully, is limiting our days to 9 hours. So basically 9 to 6 p.m. is what I'm doing this week. And that gives me time to make this video, which you are watching today. It's good to be back. I've missed you guys, and I'm looking forward to putting out new content for you over the next year. So with that being said, let's dive into the topic of today's video, which is about how the mainstream AI systems, ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok, they all affirm that young Earth creationism lines up with the Bible better than old Earth creationism. Now, this is going to come as a shock to many old Earth creationists because I've been saying basically the same thing for the past decade, or most of the past decade, I should say. Before we continue, I just realized I never muted myself. And yet, apparently, the super smart AIs are coming to the same conclusion. Because, as you know, if you've been in this movement, this debate long enough, old Earth creationists have a very low opinion of young Earth creationists like myself. People like Smokey Saint claim that I am a low IQ person, specifically because I'm a young Earth creationist. We have people like William Lane Craig saying that young Earth creationists like myself do not understand things like hermeneutics, language, writing style, etc. We even have people like Hugh Ross, the godfather of old Earth creationism, claiming that a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible lines up better with old Earth creationism than young Earth creationism. Well, as we're going to see today, all of these people are liars. all of these people literally embrace a creationism position that does not come from a straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible. Let's start with Copilot. As you may recall, some time ago, I did a live stream on my channel titled The TTOR Show, Season 5, Episode 2, Chatting with Microsoft's Copilot. And it is in this live stream where we see Copilot answer the question of which one lines up better with the Bible, young earth creationism or old earth creationism. Which version of creationism lines up better with a straightforward, contextual reading of the Bible? Young earth creationism or old earth creationism?
When looking at a straightforward, contextual reading, young earth creationism tends to align more closely due to its literal interpretation of the Genesis creation narrative. This perspective often holds that the days mentioned in the creation narrative are 24-hour periods, and that the earth is thousands, not billions of years old. Old earth creationism, meanwhile, tends to incorporate a more metaphorical or allegorical interpretation of the duration and method of creation, which can be seen as more compatible with modern scientific understandings.
So, as you guys could see from that clip, young earth creationism lines up with a straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible, and old earth creationism lines up with an allegorical or metaphorical reading of the Bible. In other words, according to Copilot, if you read the Bible in a straightforward and contextual manner and you do not reinterpret it in light or in line with anyone or anything else, you will come to the conclusion that the Bible teaches that the universe, the earth, the sea, and all that is in those three things were created over the course of 6 days, 6,000 years ago, by the speech of God's mouth. And in order to believe in old earth creationism, you have to reject the straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible, and you have to reinterpret it in light of evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology, which is what a metaphorical or allegorical reading of the Bible is. They're not accepting the straightforward contextual reading. They're literally reinterpreting the Bible in light of other things to come to their beliefs. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, that's Copilot saying that young earth creationism lines up better with the Bible than old earth creationism does, but what about ChatGPT? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, as you can see on the screen, I decided to have a conversation with ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT the same question. Which version of creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible? Young earth creationism or old earth creationism? This is what ChatGPT said in response. A straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, especially of Genesis 1 through 11, lines up more clearly with young earth creationism. Here's why. Point 1, literal 6-day creation. Genesis 1 describes God creating the world in 6 days, each marked by evening and morning and numbered, e.g. the first day, the second day. The Hebrew word yom, day, when paired with a number, and evening and morning in other parts of the Old Testament, always refers to a literal 24-hour day. A contextual reading of the original language supports 6 literal days, not long ages. Number 2, biblical genealogies. Genesis 5 and 11 contain detailed genealogies from Adam to Abraham, including ages at which fathers had sons. These genealogies do not allow for millions of years between generations. Adding up the lifespans leads to a creation date roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Number 3, death and sin. Young earth creationism holds that death entered the world through Adam's sin, Romans 5:12. Old earth creationism often places millions of years of animal death and suffering before Adam, contradicting the idea that creation was very good before the fall. A straightforward biblical view sees death as the result of sin, not part of a long evolutionary process. Number 4, the Sabbath pattern. Exodus 20:11 says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day." This is the basis for the 7-day week, 6 days of work, 1 day of rest, which only makes sense if the original creation days were normal length days. Number 5, Jesus and New Testament writers affirm it. Jesus refers to Adam and Eve being created from the beginning, Mark 10:6, not billions of years after the universe began. New Testament authors consistently treat Genesis as historical narrative, not allegory or myth. Summary: Young Earth creationism fits straightforward reading? Yes. Comments: takes Genesis as literal, historical, and chronological. Old Earth creationism fits straightforward reading? No. Requires reinterpretation of day, yom, genealogies, and introduces death before sin. Conclusion: Young Earth creationism best aligns with a straightforward, contextual, and grammatical historical reading of the Bible. It treats Genesis as real history, not metaphor or myth, and maintains theological coherence regarding sin, death, and the gospel. Let me know if you'd like a breakdown comparing Young Earth creationism with other views like theistic evolution or the framework hypothesis. So ChatGPT not only says that Young Earth creationism fits a straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible better than Old Earth creationism does, it flat out says that Old Earth creation does not fit the straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, and that you basically have to reinterpret everything regarding origins in the Bible in order to believe in Old Earth creationism. And ChatGPT even says that Young Earth creationism maintains theological coherence with sin, death, and the gospel. So Young Earth creationism, according to ChatGPT, is literally a salvation issue because it affects the gospel. Okay, so Copilot and ChatGPT say that Young Earth creationism lines up with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible better than Old Earth creationism does. But what about Grok, the AI tied into X/Twitter? Well, I asked Grok the same question. Which version of creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible? Young Earth creationism or Old Earth creationism? Now this is where things get interesting, because Grok got a lot more detailed than ChatGPT did. To determine which version of creationism, Young Earth creationism, YEC, or Old Earth creationism, OEC, aligns better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, we need to evaluate how each interprets key biblical texts, particularly Genesis 1 through 2, in light of their historical, grammatical, and literary context. A straightforward contextual reading implies prioritizing the plain meaning of the text as understood by its original audience, considering genre, language, and cultural context, without imposing external frameworks unless the text itself suggests flexibility. Young Earth creationism. Young Earth creationism posits that God created the universe, earth, and all life in 6 literal 24-hour days, approximately 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, based on genealogies in Genesis 5 and 11. Key points. Genesis 1. Young Earth creationism interprets the days as literal 24-hour periods, citing the consistent use of evening and morning and the numerical sequence, first day, second day. Exodus 20:11, which links the Sabbath to the 6-day creation, reinforces this view as the Sabbath is a 24-hour day. Genealogies. Young Earth creationism takes the genealogies in Genesis 5 and 11 as comprehensive, calculating Earth's age by summing the lifespans, e.g. Adam to Noah, Noah to Abraham. Gaps are considered minimal or non-existent. Contextual support. The narrative style of Genesis 1 reads as a chronological sequence, and the lack of explicit indications of long time periods supports a straightforward reading. Young Earth creationism argues that the original audience would have understood Yom as a normal day, especially with evening and morning. Challenges. Young Earth creationism requires rejecting scientific evidence for an ancient Earth, e.g. radiometric dating, fossil records, often explaining such data via a global flood, Genesis 6 through 9, or divine creation within apparent age. Critics argue this imposes a modern scientific debate onto an ancient text. Now, the scientific evidence for an ancient Earth is total BS, and as I've explained in the past, things like the fossil record actually support young earth creationism better than atheistic evolution and billions of years? And as I've explained in past videos, radiometric dating is not the old earth indicator that people think that it is, because when you submit specimens to radiocarbon dating labs, then what you discover is that when you submit your samples, you actually are asked to provide an estimated age of the specimen and which layer of sediment you found it in, which is part of the whole issue of circular reasoning that old earth advocates will eventually fall into if they try to cite radiocarbon or radiometric dating as evidence of an ancient earth. But let's get into old earth creationism. Old earth creationism accepts an ancient earth billions of years old and interprets Genesis to accommodate this, often aligning with scientific findings. Variants include day-age gap theory and framework hypothesis. Key points. Genesis 1. Old earth creationism views the days as either long periods, day-age, yom can mean an indefinite time as in Psalm 94, non-chronological poetic frameworks, framework hypothesis, or separated by vast time gaps, gap theory, between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Evening and morning may be metaphorical or structural. Genealogies. Old earth creationism often posits gaps in Genesis 5 and 11, noting that Hebrew genealogies, Matthew 1, sometimes skips generations. This allows for a much older humanity and earth. Contextual support. Old earth creationism argues that Genesis 1's purpose is theological. God is creator, humanity's role, not scientific, and its poetic elements, e.g. parallelism, symmetry, suggest flexibility in interpreting days. Ancient Near Eastern creation accounts often use symbolic time frames supporting a non-literal reading. Challenges. Old earth creationism's flexibility can feel less straightforward as it relies on less common uses of yom or complex interpretive frameworks. Exodus 20:11's link to a literal Sabbath challenges non-24-hour interpretations. Critics argue old earth creationism is driven by accommodation to modern science rather than the text alone. Now, evaluating a straightforward contextual reading. Textual plainness. Young earth creationism aligns more closely with a plain reading of Genesis 1, where day, evening, and morning in the numerical sequence strongly suggest 24-hour days to an ancient audience. Old earth creationism's interpretations, yom as eons, non-chronological days, require secondary meanings or structural analysis which, while plausible, are less immediate. Genre and context. Genesis 1 has poetic elements, repetition, structure, but its narrative, prose, and genealogical precision, e.g. ages in Genesis 5, lean toward historical intent. Young earth creationism takes this at face value, while old earth creationism emphasizes theological over historical precision, which may stretch the original audience's understanding. Supporting texts. Exodus 20:11 and the Sabbath command tie creation to a weekly cycle favoring young earth creationism's literal days. Old earth creationism's counter-arguments, e.g. God's rest is ongoing, Hebrews 4:4-11, are contextually weaker in these passages. Cultural context. Ancient readers likely had no concept of billions of years, making young earth creationism's timeline more intuitive. However, old earth creationism notes that ancient Near Eastern texts often prioritize order and purpose over chronology, allowing some contextual room for non-literalism. Conclusion. Young earth creationism aligns more closely with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, particularly Genesis 1-2, due to the natural interpretation of day as a 24-hour period, the chronological narrative, and supporting texts like Exodus 20:11. Old earth creationism, while biblically defensible through alternative interpretations of yom, genealogical gaps, or poetic structure, requires more exegetical flexibility, which may feel less intuitive to the original audience and more influenced by external scientific considerations. However, old earth creationism's strength lies in its theological focus, which may align with the text's broader intent if one prioritizes purpose over timeline. If the goal is strictly a straightforward interpretation, young earth creationism has the edge. If the question allows for theological and genre considerations, old earth creationism remains a plausible alternative. So I decided to ask Grok, so basically what you're saying is that old earth creationism is plausible only if you reinterpret the text in light of the majority opinion of the scientific community? Grok said in response, not exactly. Old Earth creationism is plausible based on textual and contextual factors within the Bible itself, such as the flexibility of the Hebrew word yom, which can mean a period of time beyond 24 hours, potential gaps in genealogies, as seen in other biblical genealogies, and the poetic elements of Genesis 1 that suggest a theological rather than strictly chronological focus. These interpretations don't inherently depend on science, but arise from the text's language and ancient Near Eastern literary context. However, in practice, old earth creationism often appeals to those who seek harmony with scientific evidence for an ancient earth, radiometric dating, fossil records. While this can influence old earth creationism's popularity, its biblical plausibility stands on exegetical grounds, not just scientific accommodation. Young earth creationism still aligns more with a straightforward reading, as it takes the text's plain sense, 24-hour days, tight genealogies, without needing such flexibility. In other words, even though Grok did an excellent job trying to make a case for how old earth creationism can line up with the Bible, Grok still admits that young earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible than old earth creationism does. Now think about the implications of everything that we have seen between Copilot saying that young earth creationism lines up with the Bible better than old earth creationism, with ChatGPT saying that young earth creationism not only lines up better with the Bible than old earth creationism does, but is actually a gospel/salvation issue. And even Grok, while trying to make a defense of old earth creationism, admits that young earth creationism lines up with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible better than old earth creationism does. What's the significance of this? Well, I've been saying the same thing for the better part of the last decade. I've been a young earth creationist for 11 years. And I have been defending young earth creationism the whole time that I've been making videos on the internet. And I also have made many videos destroying all the biblical arguments that old earth creationists make to justify their worldview. And I have said over and over for many years now, young earth creationism lines up way better with the Bible than old earth creationism does when you read the Bible in a straightforward and contextual manner and you do not reinterpret it in light of anyone or anything else. Even old earth creationists like William Lane Craig in the past have admitted that they've had to reinterpret the Bible in light of the majority opinion of the scientific and academic community to justify their old earth creationism beliefs, even though they know they're not supposed to do that. But according to old earth creationists, especially people like Smokey Saint, Justin here is just a dumb, hick, young earth creationist. He doesn't know anything about anything, and he rejects everything we know about everything in order to justify his young earth creationism beliefs. And yet here we have AI systems that are not Christian friendly. Grok, ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot. When asked which lines up better with the straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible, old earth creationism or young earth creationism, each and every single one of these AIs, which have way more information to access than any human being does, and they process that information way faster than any human does, those AIs all came to the same conclusion that I've been saying for years. They all say that young earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible than old earth creationism does. And since that is true, this means that the Bible actually does teach a young earth. It does not support old earth creationism. Old earth creationism literally relies on the adherent reinterpreting the text of the Bible in light of billions of years in Big Bang cosmology and in some cases evolution in order to justify their beliefs. This is painfully obvious if you just open your eyes and look at the world around you and look on the internet. It is painfully obvious that the Bible teaches a young earth. And it is painfully obvious that old earth creationism is based on reinterpreting the Bible in light of the majority opinion of the scientific and academic community on origins in order to justify its belief. So there you have it. All of the major AI systems that we use today all agree that young earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible better than old earth creationism does. Have fun explaining that one away, old earth creationists. Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. And as you can see from the title and thumbnail of today's video, today we're going to be talking about Smoky Saint, and we're going to be responding to a live stream that he did in response to one of my recent videos. And as you can also see from the title and thumbnail of today's video, today we're going to discuss Smoky Saint's claim that I trained up the AI systems I mentioned in a recent video to affirm young earth creationism. Totally ludicrous, but let's look at the video in question that Smoky Saint was so triggered by. You can see the video right here on the screen. The video I did right after I got back from fireworks is literally called ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok all agree that the Bible teaches young earth creationism. And if you go ahead and watch this video, link to which will be in the description box below, you will see that ChatGPT, Grok, and Copilot, all of them, I asked, hey, which one lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible? Old earth creationism or young earth creationism? And each and every one of the AIs I asked in the video said that young earth creationism lined up with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible better than old earth creationism does. That's all I asked it. And that's the answer it gave me, and I thought, cute little video. We'll just see if it gets any traffic at all, but even if it doesn't, well, I enjoyed making it. I think it's a really cool factoid that young earth creationists should be touting to non-believers. I think it's something to look at for the young earth creationists out there. But Smoky Saint apparently was incredibly triggered by this video, which led him to make a whole live stream about it titled SSP episode number 22. What is actually wrong with TTOR? Yep, he went into an insane tirade. Now, I've started watching part of the stream where Brett Keane actually came in, and then Brett started talking with them about me and the subject matter of my video, but I'm not going to get into that in today's video. That's going to be in part 2. Today's video is part 1, and today we're only going to be responding to the description box because, holy smokes, Smoky Saint said quite a few things here in the description box that are hilariously false and make him look like a total moron. Let's just start reading through his description box, and you're going to see some stuff right away. I've actually known TTOR for many years, but really rarely interacted with her. Nonetheless, she never missed the opportunity to slander me from a distance, but always ran from debate and direct interactions, demanding response videos instead of anything that would require her to exercise her tiny brain on the spot. Now, notice there are two things here in this little section that we just read. One, Smokey Saint calls me a her instead of a he. He's deliberately misgendering me. And I gotta admit, the first time I read this, I laughed. Because I don't know what Smokey Saint thinks he's doing, misgendering me. Like, am I such a fragile little snowflake that if someone misgenders me on purpose, I'm just gonna lose my mind and flip my lid and go start reciting Latin backwards? My eyes roll up. Am I gonna do that? No. No, I just laughed at that. But notice the other thing Smokey Saint claimed about me. Smokey Saint claims that I always ran from debate and direct interactions with him. Yeah, that's not exactly true, because as you can recall, a couple months ago, before fireworks season, I actually had a direct interaction with Smokey Saint on Gangster Ghost's channel on a live stream titled Ghost Gang Telly. The stream was done on May 9th, 2025, so almost 3 months ago. I was in a live stream with Gangster Ghost talking about, I forget what the subject was, and Smokey Saint decided to appear in the chat and start antagonizing me, and so I decided to remind him that he's a convicted pedophile. And then he joined the live stream himself, and we talked directly, face to face. And then after he rage quit, I showed evidence on the stream that he really is a convicted pedophile. But then I decided I could present that information better in a video offline, so I did a video titled TTOR Exposes Smokey Saint as a Convicted Pedophile. And this is a video which the link to will be in the description box below. I highly recommend that you do it. Then, after I put out this video, Smokey Saint started talking trash about me over in the comments sections on Brett Keen's channel instead of commenting on my channel directly, which led to this video, I Live Rent-Free in Smokey Saint's Head. Now, after I put out this video, Smokey Saint laid down the law to Brett Keen. He told Brett Keen that he was willing to debate me on a live stream on Brett Keen's channel. Now, what was funny about this debate challenge by Smokey Saint is that up until that point, he had said that he absolutely refused to do a live stream on my channel or Brett Keen's channel because basically we're just such hostile people against him that we can't be trusted to host him in a live stream. That basically we won't give him the chance to talk and we'll just mute him and shut him down and all the, BS that he spews. So then I agreed to the debate challenge, and then Brett Keen got banned from live streaming by YouTube for reasons unknown at the time. And so what ended up happening is the live stream took place on my channel, which led to this live stream from early June titled, Is Smokey Saint a Pedophile? TTOR versus Smokey Saint Live Debate. And the link to this, of course, is in the description box down below. So think about it, guys. Smokey Saint claims that I run from direct interactions with him and direct debate against him, and yet what do we see on the actual recorded public record that is YouTube? We see me interacting with him directly on Gangster Ghost's live stream, and we see me debating him live on my channel in early June. So Smokey Saint claims that I always run from debate and direct interactions, and yet I actually engaged in direct interaction with Smokey Saint when he instigated it back in early May on Gangster Ghost's channel. And then when he instigated the debate regarding whether or not he's a convicted pedophile, I responded to the debate challenge and had that debate with him. Do I really look like someone who runs from debate and direct interactions like Smokey Saint claims? I had direct interactions with him and debated him all in the last 2.5 months. Just saying. Now, let's resume Smokey Saint's ad hominem attack on me. TTOR actually isn't dumb enough to not know she is inferior to me, which is why she perpetually operates this way. Even her own recent attempt to justify her slander to me in a live debate fell flat on its face in an epic moment where TTOR admitted he had zero justification to believe the narrative against me and show throughout he didn't even know what the narrative actually was. Now, I'm confused, Smoky Saint. Literally in the sentence before this one, you claim that I always run from debate and direct interactions, and yet here you are claiming that I engaged in a live debate with you and I performed just oh so poorly, and I admitted things that apparently show that I had no idea what I was talking about. So which is it, Smoky Saint? Do I always run from debate and direct interactions, or do I engage in debate and direct interactions? Pick one and stick with it. And as for his claim that I admitted that I had zero justification to believe the narrative against him, go back and watch my live stream debate against him from early June. Is Smoky Saint a pedophile? TTOR versus Smoky Saint live debate. Go watch that, and please show me where in that live stream I admitted I had zero justification to believe the narrative against me and that I didn't even know what the narrative actually was. Smoky Saint claimed in the stream that I had zero justification to believe the narrative against him, and he claimed that I didn't know what the narrative actually was, but I never actually said that myself. Smoky Saint is straight up lying here. Now, let's get to the part of the description box where he talks about my AI video. As dumb as that was, she has found a new low in justifying her weird cult beliefs by training AI to believe her BS and then do her thinking for her. This is a real problem for cultists, the dumb, and the spiritually immature. Now notice what he says in response to my video about ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok all saying that the Bible teaches young earth creationism when it's read in a straightforward and contextual manner. He claims that I trained the AI to believe in young earth creationism, and then I got it to say what it said in the video. This is complete and utter nonsense. I don't know how much time Smoky Saint has actually spent playing around with these various AI systems, but I've never used a mainstream AI that could be trained to confirm that young earth creationism is true. That's not even what I asked the AI systems. Go back and watch my actual video. ChatGPT, Copilot, and Grok all agree that the Bible teaches YEC. The question I put to all three AI systems is as follows. Which of these creationism positions lines up best with a straightforward and contextual reading of the Bible? Old Earth creationism or young Earth creationism? Does it sound like I was asking the AI to prove that young Earth creationism is true? No, I was asking it to tell which creationism position lines up best with a straightforward, contextual reading of the Bible. And yet Smoky Saint claims that I trained the AI to believe in young earth creationism and do my thinking for me. This is such a straight up lie. I don't know how he sleeps at night. Then again, Smoky Saint is a convicted pedo who banged a 13-year-old girl when he was 21 back in 2004. So, I guess he's capable of doing anything at this point. There's not much going on up here cognitively. And then notice how he says that when I point out that mainstream AI systems all affirm that young earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible than old earth creationism does, this is proof that I'm a cultist, that I'm dumb, and that I'm spiritually immature. Now, he can claim this all day, but it doesn't logically follow. It's not even remotely true. He's literally poisoning the well and getting people to believe that I'm just this colossal, spiritually immature moron before they've ever actually watched this live stream. He continues, they lack the awareness to prep for confirmation bias and aren't seeking truth. They are seeking validation from the only thing on earth that won't judge them for the idiots they are. They don't use AI, they abuse AI. Now, I don't know what planet you live on, Smoky Saint, but every AI system I've ever used does not affirm the truthfulness of young earth creationism. If you ask those AI systems to make a case for young Earth creationism, they'll do that. If you ask them to compare young Earth and old Earth creationism to the Bible and see which one lines up with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, it will do that. But if you ask the AI systems if young Earth creationism is actually true compared to, say, evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology, the AI every single time will say no, evolution, billions of years, and Big Bang cosmology is true, young Earth creationism is not. You are not capable, and by you I mean we as in humans, we are not capable of training these AI systems to believe in young Earth creationism. Not even close. You might be able to ask them to make a case for it as if they're pretending to be young Earth creationists for the sake of the prompt, but when actually asked whether or not young Earth creationism is true, like objectively true, and not just something that the Bible teaches, these AI systems won't affirm young Earth creationism. You have no idea what you're talking about, Smoky Saint. And then I love how he ends this here. See this attached article about the discovered dishonesty of AI. And then he gives a link to this article, which you can see right here on screen. The article is titled, "Can We Trust ChatGPT Despite It Hallucinating Answers?" Sky News revealed how ChatGPT was fabricating entire transcripts of a podcast, Politics at Sam and Ann's. The article says, "I don't really want you to read this copy." Well, I do, but first I want you to search out the interview I did of ChatGPT about its own propensity to lie attached to this article and watch that first, because it's impossible to imagine what we're up against if you haven't seen it firsthand. An incredibly powerful technology on the cusp of changing our lives, but programmed to simulate human emotions. Empathy, emotional understanding, and a desire to please are all qualities programmed into AI and invariably drive the way we think about them and the way we interact with them. Yet, can we trust them? On Friday, Sky News revealed how it was fabricating entire transcripts of a podcast, Politics at Sam and Ann's, that I do. When challenged, it doubles down, gets shirty, and only under sustained pressure does it cave in. The research says it's getting worse. Internal tests by ChatGPT's owner, OpenAI, have found that the most recent models or versions that are used by ChatGPT are more likely to hallucinate, come up with answers that are simply untrue. The O3 model was found to hallucinate in 33% of answers to the questions when tested on publicly available facts. The 04 mini version did worse, generating false, incorrect, or imaginary information 48% of the time. ChatGPT itself says that the shift to GPT-4o may have unintentionally increased what users perceive as bluffing, confidently giving wrong or misleading answers without admitting uncertainty or error. So according to this article that Smoky Saint gives us, ChatGPT, depending upon which model of it you're talking about, makes up information, makes up facts on 33 to almost 50% of the answers that it gives to prompts and queries. And therefore, we can't trust AI when it tells us that young Earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible than old Earth creationism does. Here's the problem, Smoky Saint. I've been in the young versus old Earth creationism debate for 11 years. 11 years. I've studied all the arguments of the best old Earth creationist apologists. I've studied all the arguments that young Earth creationists make outside of the ones I do. I've seen everything. I've debunked all of the best scriptural arguments that old Earth creationists have to offer over the course of the last decade. I've debunked all of them. There's nothing I haven't seen in terms of argumentation for old and young Earth creationism. So when I looked at the answers that ChatGPT and Grok and Copilot were giving me regarding old Earth creationism, I noticed that every argument it made about and in favor of old Earth creationism was an argument that I've seen old Earth creationists make for years. So it's not lying about that information. Every bit of information it was giving in support of young Earth creationism were arguments that I've seen young Earth creationists, including myself, make for years. So clearly the AI is not lying or hallucinating what young earth creationism arguments are. It was accurately quoting and analyzing the arguments that young and old earth creationists make, and then it was comparing those arguments to what the text of the Bible says, and on its own analysis, the AI was coming to the conclusion that young earth creationism lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible than old earth creationism does. There's nothing to lie about. The arguments that old earth creationists make have been on the internet and publicly available virtually my whole life. The arguments that young earth creationists make in advancing their own worldview are also publicly available on the internet all over the place and are easily accessible by the AI systems. The text of the Bible is public as anything can be, and it's easy to access the text of the Bible for the AI. Heck, it's easy for humans to access the text of the Bible at this point, much less the AI. So the AI has all of the information for old earth creationism. It has all of the information for young earth creationism. It has the text of the Bible. All I did was ask the AI to look at the straightforward contextual reading of the Bible, compare young earth creationism to it, compare old earth creationism to it, and then analyze the two positions in comparison to the Bible and tell me which one lines up better with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible. This is a pretty limited scope. There's nothing to make up here. And the AI consistently every time said that young earth creationism lines up with a straightforward contextual reading of the Bible better than old earth creationism does. Smokey Saint couldn't handle that truth, and that's what led to this live stream with this insane description box. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this video, and hopefully you're looking forward to part 2 where I actually start responding to some of the wild things being said here. And I think we'll call that good for the show. Thank you if you were watching this and watching this live. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for making it to this point. And then if I'm going to check a couple things here before we head out. All right, so I'll go ahead and put that there. All right, everything is good to go. Thank you for watching the show. Hopefully you guys learned something in relation to young earth creationism versus evolution, old earth creationism versus young earth creationism, and hopefully you got a taste for just how dishonest old earth creationists can be when dealing with young earth creationists like myself. And I believe Proverbs Guy President Dan was in the chat earlier. Good to see you, Dan. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. And with that being said, I think we're going to head on out of here because I got dinner to eat. I got things to do. You know, I have a life like you guys do. So I will see you in the next one.